Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Take 15 podcast. I'm Lauren, and today we have a unique episode. It's all about exercise, sleep, well-being, and leadership. So it all started when a colleague shared a post on LinkedIn written by Ben Lucas, who happens to be my guest today. The post was about the importance of exercise, and it really resonated with me. I'm a runner, I also love to swim, and I definitely see a correlation between how fit I'm feeling and my general outlook on work and life. A strong body builds a stronger mind. Well, it turns out Ben's post resonated with a lot of people, not just me. It's been viewed more than 1.5 million times. And yes, you heard that right, 1.5 million times. What made this also interesting to me is that Ben is a senior leader using his social media platform to spread the word about the benefits of exercise and well-being. Ben leads the UK wealth and asset management consulting practice at KPMG, and when we first spoke, he told me he was passionate about exercise, well-being, and leadership, and so that's what we explore today. Think of the show as 3 acts. Act 1 is where we talk about the post, why he wrote it, why it struck such a nerve, and the most common question he received after the post. We also talk about why he's so committed to exercise and the fact that for him, exercise is performance culture. In Act 2, I asked Ben about a series of conversations he had late last year with a group of leaders of wealth and asset management firms about how the role of leadership in asset management has changed. Those conversations informed a new report just released, and you can find a link in the show notes. And finally, Act 3 is where I ask my standard closing questions, and you'll have to stay to the end to hear if Ben chooses flight or invisibility as his superpower. And that's our show for today. I hope it inspires you to rethink what it means to be a high performer and to build exercise into your daily routine so it becomes second nature. Please enjoy my conversation with Ben Lucas. Ben Lucas, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm really thrilled to have you because there is so much that I want to talk to you about. And as I was trying to sort of frame the episode in my mind, I kind of thought of it as sort of 3 acts or 3 parts. Sort of Act 1 being the LinkedIn post that really got everything started. And actually that's how I found you, was through that LinkedIn post. Act 2 is really about the work that you do at KPMG around the role of leadership and how that has changed in the asset management industry and the C-suite. And then sort of Act 3 is the sort of closing questions and sort of the more about Ben section. So just that's how I'm going to frame our conversation.
Perfect.
So I thought a good place for me to start and would be to tell the audience, or to, I guess, start by reading just the first 3 lines of this post on LinkedIn. And just so the audience knows, I will include a link to that post in the show notes so they can go and read it in full. So you wrote, "This is my biggest non-negotiable, and it really shouldn't be controversial at all. Exercise, daily and without apology." So 1.5 million views, more than 200,000 reactions, and nearly 900 comments later. What do you make of the response?
Yeah, I think it certainly struck a nerve, right? I think that's the interesting bit. The sort of challenge for me is why does something so sort of painfully obvious strike such a chord with so many people? And for me, I think all it did is just validate why I posted it in the first place, right? Which is, there is still a perception that to be a leader in industry, and particularly in financial services and professional services and wealth and asset management, you need to be kind of all in on this hard lifestyle of kind of always at your desk, that it's always there and sort of permanently on, and all things associated with that. And some of my team had said to me, they had been told to exercise. They'd been said, look, you can take time away from your desk and things like that, and they'd never done it. And until I was publicly turning down meetings because it was clashing with times that I had set aside to get some fresh air, or kind of go and just get my heart rate up and get the blood pumping. And yeah, it's for me, the real awakening was the people saying to me, look, we only felt we had the permission to do this, right? There's kind of explicit permission, saying the words, but the implicit permission of kind of seeing people in leadership roles doing it. And the thing is, I'm not an athlete, right? I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not even good at most sports, right? But I feel better when I exercise, and I feel happier, and I feel healthier. And honestly, so many of the things that I process to do with my job and the problems that we're trying to solve, um, the moments of kind of inspiration and the real things happen away from my desk. So for me, I just wanted to take that sort of implicit permission, maybe is what we could call it, and just make it as public as possible, to as many people as possible, so that they could see that you don't need, nobody needs permission to look after their own health, and a fundamental part of that is getting up and moving. And that means different things to different people, right? Some people that's getting out for a run, some people that's going for a walk, some people it's going lifting a load of weights. But whatever you need to do to kind of get the blood flowing, I think, is the important thing.
Yeah. So I think what was so powerful about that post is that it was coming from someone so senior in the industry. And to your point about permission, people were like, oh, wow, I have permission to do these things. So what had prompted that post? I mean, had something happened leading up to it? Was there some kind of realization? Sort of what was the process that led you to write that post?
Yeah, look, that's a brilliant question, right? Because there's quite a lot that goes. Nothing obviously comes out of nowhere, but for me, and I recently posted again, that had a decent uptake, right, around reconciling this sort of approach to life, right? A balance, focusing on exercise and sleep and health and well-being, with a performance culture. And for me, the two are the same thing, right? Like it's not, there's no conflict between a performance culture and kind of getting good sleep and getting time away and time out in the sunlight and things like that. It was a bunch of things. Look, I've taken on a big leadership role at KPMG, and over the last 18 months, leading a team of professionals that are kind of highly dedicated, and you can just see in all of them the effort and the desire to succeed and the drive to solve the client problems and things. And it's all consuming. And I think it became very clear to me that if I wasn't sort of really driving home the message that we need to make sure we're getting that time, and it's more than exercise. It's more than exercise. It's so many other things as well. But exercise was the one fundamental for me that changed my life. I came up kind of classic consulting, right? I did big consulting, I did boutique consulting, and then back to partnership at a big consulting firm, always in financial services. And that brought with it everything that you expect from a kind of consulting lifestyle, right? It is all consuming. You traveled a lot in the old days. You entertained a lot. You did all that sort of stuff. And it took its toll on me, right? It took its toll on my mental health, my physical health. And the single best thing I ever did was to take a step back from all of that and just focus on putting health and wellness at the heart of what I was doing, and just being incredibly honest with everybody about the journey that I was on. So rather than sort of hiding your gym bag under the desk and sneaking out to the gym, or kind of taking meetings at 7 and taking meetings at 9 and not worrying about your sleep and the impact it was going to have, but just being open about why you were prioritizing it. The distinction and the really important bit for me is that the moment I started doing that is when I started to become genuinely successful, as opposed to what other people think is successful. I started to feel like I was achieving more and happier, and the things were in line with my values and what I believed in and what I cared about. So it's not perfect. It's not a sort of blueprint or a Bible for other people to live their lives by. But what I can say is it's my honest experience, right? It's what I've seen work with myself, my teams, the people that I lead, and how they lead their teams.
So you made a conscious choice to change some behaviors and to, I guess, learn some new behaviors, perhaps what we would call habits. I was listening yesterday to a podcast with James Clear, who's written a lot about habits, his book Atomic Habits. So I'm curious, you made a very decisive shift to incorporate health and wellness into your life. What were some of those new habits that you had to form, and have you been able to stick with them?
Yeah, so it's again a brilliant question, right? So for me, this comes down to I took a really long, hard look a few years ago at why people fail to. Well, most people want to be a little bit fitter. Most people want to be a bit healthier. They want to live a little bit longer, right? And yet, despite that, 80% of people don't actually use the gym memberships that they have, and lots of people drink more frequently than they'd like, and all these sorts of things. And I looked hard at why that was, and there's not a problem with information. There's information everywhere. You can get 6-minute abs on Instagram. You can get Apple Health to beam a PT right into your living room. Right? There's no problem with consuming information in this space. The problem is one of the human condition. It is around motivation. It is around what we as beings respond to, and this over reliance on this honestly, frankly, ridiculous concept of discipline, right? When actually we respond to short-term stimulus and setting our environment up for success. So I actually, before joining KPMG, I had some time away from the market to found an app, a social fitness and habit building app called Magic Mountain, and that is what I used to. I built that platform specifically to put sort of social accountability, holding you and your friends accountable to the promises you make about health and fitness, to put that at the heart of your friendship group and allow kind of tribal dynamics and kind of not wanting to let each other down and falling in love with the process of health and fitness again to become the focus. And once I started down that road, it was just taking those principles and applying them in a corporate environment that helped me to build that out. And the other thing, if I can, sorry, I know I'm going on a bit here, but like, it's easy to think that you've got all the answers, right? Like you kind of you build an app and it's reasonably successful in the habit building space. You think you know all the answers, right? Or you read a book from James Clear and you think, okay, I've solved habits. Well, like even with this the pandemic, right? So some of my team, I was talking about walking meetings and I was talking about all these things, and one of my team came to me and said, Ben, like at my level, I have to present all the time. Right? Is that I can't do walking meetings. Like walking meetings are great if you're kind of solving problems on the phone or you're doing a one-to-one, but you've got to think about what it means for the team. And instantly we were like, God, we've missed a whole chunk of how this is impacting people at the moment. And we ended up changing things around to make sure that we rotated who shared screens and who was expected to. But just I think the important bit is having that feedback loop, so that even when you're trying to do the right things and you're trying to help, that you just listen to the people that you're trying to help, right? That was the biggest challenge, because I thought, yep, solved it, absolutely brilliant. And one of my team put me straight. And that's the other thing, we crowdsource so many ideas, right? Like so much of what we do in KPMG comes from the wider team, right? And having that feedback loop.
Yes. So I do want to come back to the COVID element in a moment, but before we go, I just want to probe you a little bit more on your non-negotiable. I know exercise is your non-negotiable, but for you, what does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So I do a few different things. I am aggressively mediocre at almost everything, right? So I am I'm not winning any competitions in any particular sport, but I'm okay. What I've really, a couple of years ago, when I created the app and all sorts of challenges sprung out of that, I met some Olympic rowers that taught me how to row, and I did a bunch of challenges. I rowed the Thames straight 200 kilometers for charity, and raised a load of money and had an amazing time. And that I kind of fell in love with it. So rowing is but just to be clear, I'm a terrible rower. I'm like, anyone that's listening or watching or whatever would be a better rower than me. But it is the being on the water, just the movement, everything. I find it very relaxing, and it works for me for sure. And I like kind of, I've always liked weightlifting. Yeah, I've always enjoyed the weightlifting side, and I walk a lot. I do a lot of walking meetings, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay. So, I mean, you have a very full life. You lead a big group, you manage a lot of people. The audience doesn't know this, but I'm going to tell them you have 3 little children at home, 3 under the age of 3. You have to juggle a lot, and I'm sure there are days where you think, oh, exercise is a thing that can just wait a day. But I'm assuming that you really do stick with it. You have to make that trade-off and realize that you still have to do it no matter what.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one. I don't have days like that, right? Like, and this is the bit that I think people really struggle to get. Like, I fell in love with the process, right? I removed the decisions around, am I going to exercise? There's no debate on a daily basis as to, am I going to exercise? Like, I used to think I was somebody that really didn't like routine, and that I was maverick and all these sorts of things. And it's just rubbish, right? Like, I absolutely love routine. I have black coffee in the morning. I do a few hours work. I get into that process, and then I work out, and that's the point of the day at which I clear all the rubbish out of my head, and I'm able to kind of really get my focus, and then I get settled for my next stint of kind of getting back to the problem solving. It is religious for me, right? It's the process that I follow every day. So I don't miss days unless I'm injured, and my training is entirely centered around being able to keep training for as long as possible. So I'm not trying to be the best at anything, but I want to never get injured. I want to be able to keep moving for as long as possible. I don't know who it was. It might have been James Clear, actually, but somebody was talking about the centenary Olympics, right? I want to be in the best possible shape for being 100 years old and being in the centenary Olympics. And that's like, I like that. As I say, I'm no athlete, but I enjoy the process.
So what impact do you think the COVID-19 global pandemic has had? Lots of people have been in lockdown, so their lives have been upturned in some ways. They're mostly teleworking. Do you think being at home has enabled them to sort of explore and do more exercise from home, or has it inhibited their exercise because they're out of their usual routine and they're under more pressure to perform in a virtual environment?
Yeah, so this, I think, goes back to the previous point earlier around the line between sort of who's impacted and in what ways. For me, I think there is a big dividing line. I think that if you're if you've got a house in the country and you've got family and you're surrounded by people, I think that your ability to handle this sort of isolation and the changes that have happened, it's a lot easier for you to do that than it is if you're kind of on a flat on your own in central London. You're not allowed to see anybody for all that time, and there's no outside space, and it's going for a walk means walking down a dark street on your own at night. And I think so much of this conversation has revolved around technology and kind of what's the new world of technology, and which conferencing services do we use and things like that. And ultimately it all comes back to people, right? It all comes back to the empathy and understanding of each individual circumstance. And I have to say, I think I didn't do a good enough job of understanding what all of my people were going through. It's easy to think what your experience is what everybody's experience is, and I just think there's definitely been a lot of people that have really, really had to be very resilient throughout this period. That I suspect are looking back to. I suspect most people are looking back to getting back to some form of normality. But I definitely think it's not been equally distributed, right? And we've tried hard to look after the people in our teams that are most exposed, right, and most isolated. But there's only so much you can do through a laptop screen, right? And so we do a lot of challenges and events and things like that, and try and stay as connected as we can. And look, it's not all negative, right? There's some upsides. One of the really big upsides that we found is we've got people in Edinburgh, we've got people in Birmingham, we've got people in Leeds, and actually a lot of them fed back to me that when we moved to virtual teams, I was able to talk directly to my entire team at a completely level playing field, and nobody felt like there was a kind of London team and then everybody else and an in joke and things like that. And that really, really worked. So for me, it's about trying to work out which bits of this can we keep that are useful, right? And some of the learnings. But I think also it would be naive if we didn't think the hybrid world was going to be a difficult challenge, right? Given when everybody's remote, it kind of makes sense, and when everybody's in the office, it makes sense. I think the hybrid challenge of COVID is the return from COVID is going to be the difficult one.
Mm-hmm. If I may, I'd love to just tag a little bit more on this sort of the tension on performance culture versus sort of exercising. There was a comment on your original post that said, "Great post. Make sure to defend the junior guys when they tell their manager, I can't make that meeting, I'm at the gym." And then you just wrote to mention another post, and you said probably the most common question you received after your last post was, how do you reconcile your views on exercise, sleep, and time away from the desk with a performance culture? And in your mind, they're one and the same. There is no division between those two. But for many, there is still a division. So how do you get that message out that it's more broadly incorporated, that people say it's okay, you have permission?
Yeah, and it's important that we understand what I say. What I'm not saying is that everybody else's performance culture is mine, right? So what I am explicitly saying is that high performance for me and for the teams that I lead is when those people are the best possible versions of themselves, myself included, right? And those people are rested, they are inspired, they have had their time to. I mean, we had a conversation. We have everybody has them right these days, huddles, right? We have the big team huddle, and we were chatting about when was the last time you were kind of at your desk and you had a moment of inspiration. Almost never, right? You're walking the dog, you've got off a rowing machine, you've been for a run, and it's hit you as you're in the shower afterwards, right? Like that. The things that the key elements needed for creative thinking, right, are not all just right in front of you on a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams, right? And that is key. So when I talk about reconciling performance culture, I can say with absolute credibility about my own experience, right, around what I believe has helped me build my career and lead the teams that I've led. I can also talk about the observations of people that I've seen be successful. Doesn't mean it's for everyone, and it doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. But what I am absolutely certain of is I had success earlier in my career, and I had success later in my career. And the success that I had later in my career, when it was balanced and I was being my whole self and I was very honest about who I was far, far more rewarding and actually felt like success rather than the first time round where actually really I felt like I was kind of playing a part and doing what kind of corporate city living should be.
Right. So in your second post, you also talk a lot about the importance of sleep. And is that something that you like to, do you have a certain number of hours? Are you fairly dogmatic about sleep? I don't know how you manage sleep with 3 little ones and a newborn in the house, but there you go.
They helped me, right? So I was terrible at sleep, and if I look, like so many of these things, like I didn't have the answer. I didn't come up with the answer for this, right? Somebody smart told me, look, your sleep really matters, right? Start thinking about it. And I read a little bit about it, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna try it. And I just started going to bed a bit earlier rather than trying to stay up as late as I can. I had this thing where I was like, my day was long, the hours were long. So whatever time it finished, I always wanted to have a certain amount of time, which I considered kind of like my time. But actually, all I was doing was eating into my sleep, right? And then my boys would be up at 5:30 or 6 or whatever time it was, and you're off and you're starting your day. I think as soon as I let that go and I just started going to bed as soon as I was tired, right? And that really is quite a lot earlier than people would think. It's almost embarrassing how early I go to bed. But I wake up without an alarm every morning, and I'm there for when my boys get up at sort of 5:30, 5:45.
That is great. I mean, I think sleep is so underrated and so incredibly powerful.
It made a big difference.
Yes. Ariana Huffington did a TED talk in 2010, really on the power of a good night's sleep. And instead of people sort of bragging about our sleep deficits, we should be actually wanting to sleep more. And she says we can sleep our way to increased productivity and happiness and smarter decision making. I think that's absolutely true. So now I'd love to just sort of segue a little bit into what I'd call our sort of the act two of our conversation.
Very good.
When I was looking on the internet, I found this great clip of you speaking about, I guess, a bit of a survey that you'd done last year where you spoke to 50 leaders of wealth and asset management firms. And the results, as you said, were really fascinating. You were really looking at how leadership had changed in the asset management and wealth industry over, I guess, the period of COVID. There were a number of incredible takeaways, and I'm wondering if you could just tell us a few of those. And I believe when we were talking earlier, some of these findings have now been put into a report. So if the audience wants to go and read some more, they might be able to find it on the internet as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think to set some context, when I took on the role leading the consulting business for wealth and asset management in the UK for KPMG, I had a number of things that were very, very important to me. Part of it was the world is changing, and people love to say the world's changing faster than it's ever changed before, and people love to say that if firms don't respond, then they're in all sorts of trouble. And actually, look, that's partially true, but also there was a front cover of The Economist, God knows how long ago, where they had like FS institutions must transform or die or something along those lines, right? And it was in 1998, and it's like, well, they've survived, they're still surviving, they're still doing very well, right? So there's a sort of, we've got to set this against the backdrop of kind of common sense. But then beyond that, it would be remiss of us to ignore very fundamental macro changes that are happening, right? Smartphones have empowered and connected us in a way that I don't think anyone could have imagined even 10 years ago, right? The cloud has made it easier to build and then scale things incredibly quickly and actually much more cheaply, right? So that looks at then a disruption element to the economy. The Internet of Things is starting to really bring everything together and blend the digital and the physical world in completely new ways. And then the way that technology and data intersect, and the ability to look at the massive amount of data that everything I just talked about as throwing out, and then interrogate that with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all things around that, you think, well, it would be hard not to imagine a dramatically different world. But it goes back to what I was saying before, right? This is everything that I've just said is technology. Everything is technology. All people want to talk about is technology. It only matters when it comes back to people. Right? It only matters when it comes back to the people side of things. And that was what was fascinating. I wanted to get around the most influential leaders of the wealth and asset management space to understand sort of how they were processing this, and who was sort of really taking the lead on the forward thinking side of things, and what were the things that they were focusing on, and how were they doing it, and what they were executing on. What was amazing is there was a massive amount of consistency, right? There were very, very few people that sort of think, oh no, it's broadly the same. There was a huge sort of sense of change is coming. We want to be at the front of that change, and our role is much broader than just deploying capital for return, right? That's the important bit, I think. And I think it starts at the top, right? You've got the sort of chief execs of these organizations now just really, I think they've known it for a long time, but really becoming more public and more vocal now around their role in wider society, and the importance of what you can do when the power of trillions of dollars wakes up to societal issues, right? And ESG and all things around that. And I think that was kind of fascinating, but also quite inspiring as well, to hear some of leaders like Ann Richards and Stuart White and people like that talk about the role that they believe that their firms play in this.
So one of the other things you mentioned in that video clip, well, two of the things that I thought were really interesting. One was that the term C-suite has, and I think your words were, an old world sort of connotation that was tied to legacy and hierarchical connotations, and we need to find better language. Have you thought more about that language and what it might look like?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, look, the bit of that I stand by is that I think the terminology is old world, right? I think it brings with it a heap of connotations around hierarchy and legacy and disconnected and kind of a group of stuffy guys sat in a boardroom somewhere making decisions about the rest of the world. And I just think that doesn't reflect the industry that we're in anymore. And actually, so much of what everybody was talking about was focused on diversity and driving change and playing a bigger role in society and making capital work for good and things like that. So look, I don't think it's my place or our place to individually come up with what that sort of new language looks like, but I think it's already starting to materialize, right? You see fintechs like Wombat and Tumalo, who the sorts of firms that are kind of really talking about shareholder activism and the language that they use when they talk about it. And you can see that some of the changes that have happened across wider society are now starting to impact the wealth and asset management space.
Yes. I think one of the things that you had said was also the mass adoption of technology has led to dramatically flatter organizations, was one of the observations. So one of the things, it was a phrase that I loved. You said many people wanted to hold on to, and the quote was the COVID muscle memory. I thought that was really, really interesting. So this idea that we can respond really rapidly, but then will we hold on to the things that we learned? What will persist? That was really fascinating to me.
Yeah. So I'm broadly a very positive person, right? And I'm also quite an honest person. So I think that is an aspiration that many people have. I think that we are institutionally set against that in many ways, right? So it is very, very difficult for large organizations to respond at the speed and scale that we did without a mass trigger event of the nature of COVID. So I think it's a bit like when people say, we want to hire entrepreneurs and we want to build intrapreneurs, and it's like, well, you don't get the upside and all the successes of the things that come with entrepreneurship without some of the downside risk, right? And you don't get the kind of mass scale change and the ability to adapt that quickly without some form of trigger event, right? But I think what some of the really forward thinking firms have done is look at how they've responded and then try to really take what went well and apply that in other parts of their business. And I've seen that done a number of times now in areas from investment to distribution to ops, right? And I think that is, I think, potentially very, very powerful to set them up for success for the future.
Yeah. So you're both a leader, but you also think about leadership in other contexts. And one of the questions I have, particularly during COVID, is how organizations are building trust. And I saw something last week from Simon Sinek, who was just saying that, trust is what happens kind of in those off-the-cuff meetings in the hallway or between meetings. And he had this sort of great analogy. He said, music is what happens sort of between the notes. And sort of trust is what happens sort of between the meetings. So in your experience, you've done, I guess, a hybrid model or maybe an entirely remote model for the last year, thinking kind of going forward, how will you advise others to help to continue to build that trust?
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to the point I made earlier about the hybrid world, all right? And none of us are crystal ball gazers, right? But I think the one thing that there's not lots of positives to come out of something so terrible at a societal level as COVID, but there is something in shared experience, right? That we've all been through this together. There is a togetherness that comes out of it, and I think keeping that sense of we're in this together is something that my teams are trying really, really hard to focus on, right? And what ways we can do that. And some of that is things like exercise and challenges and things like that. And some of it is things about the ways of communication. And this, like, are we just going to default back to 9 of us in a meeting room and 2 people on a conference call? No, right? We're going to do better than that. But we don't know, I don't think, completely what that looks like, right? I think we're in this transitional phase now where learning what that I hate the phrase, no, I'm not going to say it. I was going to say the new normal, but we nearly got all the way through this without saying it. So.
Ding ding.
Yeah, well, sorry.
That's all right. So We'll now sort of segue into the Act 3. This is the easy part for you, Ben. It's just a couple of, or 3 questions at the end that just tells me a little bit more about you and tells the audience a little bit about you. And it's really kind of lighthearted. And I'm glad that you're an optimist, because our last question, or the first of the last questions, is what we call the ray of sunshine question. And that is just one long-lasting but positive change that you hope to see as a result of the pandemic.
I think that a lot of people were, because I believe we're products of our environment, and because many people went to work, put on the same suit, same dress, and went to the same office. They believe that's what their lives were, and I think what this has done for a lot of people is cause them to think about what really matters to them, and I think that is incredibly valuable, and that I think people are changing the ways they think about work and the role that it plays in their wider life and the other things that matter to them. And I think that reflection is incredibly powerful.
Great. So the second question, and this is what I call the NASA question, and it came from a middle school.
I don't
NASA
like the sound
workbook.
of a NASA question at all.
No, it's easy, I promise you. You're about to go on a long duration space flight, and you can take one item with you on that flight. What do you choose?
I'd have to. I'm going to have to give you the cliched, like the honest answer is I would take a picture of my family. Right, that's the honest answer. If I was allowed something other than a picture of my family, I'll take a skipping rope. But
good one.
Going to tell me that skipping ropes don't work in space, so I'll stick with the picture of the family.
Okay. And speaking of space, the final question is to get you to think about a superpower. And you're allowed to choose either one of these superpowers, flight or invisibility. Whichever one you pick, you're the only one in the world that has that superpower. Which one do you pick, and what do you do with it?
What's the first option?
Flight. And the second is invisibility.
I don't need to hear the second option. It's flight, obviously, right? So I spend my eldest boy is only 3, but we when we do storytelling at night, like he likes to he loves stories about birds, right? So I think the idea of his daddy flying around all over the place would just make him incredibly happy. So
make you into more of a superhero.
Well, yeah, I mean, for him maybe at least, but definitely flight. I mean, God, who wouldn't choose flight, right? That'd be incredible. I think that'd be amazing.
Well, some do choose invisibility, and it's usually for quite interesting reasons. So, yep, flight it is today. So, Ben, it's been an absolute delight talking to you. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us today.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed the chat.
You've been listening to the Take 15 podcast from CFA Institute. If you haven't yet subscribed, you can do so on our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to the show. That way, you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd appreciate a rating and review. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us too. And a quick reminder, this podcast isn't intended to provide expert advice on the topics we covered. If you need tax, accounting, or legal advice, please consult a professional. I'm Lauren Foster. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.